Hey friends, Monodux here. Before I start diving deep into the world of the DFAM and Modular, I wanted to take a moment to go through how I used the Drumatix on my last video and talk about just why I think the Drumatix is a perfect, or Drumatix, is a perfect drum machine for anyone with a modular setup. So if you work in modular and you don't have one of these, I really do recommend it. You've heard it in my back catalog of videos, so you know kind of what the sounds are like. And there's lots of videos that go into deep detail on that. I won't touch on it a lot here, except to say that I like the sounds of it. It's not an 808, it is a 606 with a few 808 sounds available, so but I do like the sound of it. I like the sound quality. You can change the instruments, so right now if I press both of these buttons I can select which of the kicks I'm going to use. So I go into the kick channel. Right now it's on a 909. I've got 808 and original 606. And you can do that with several of the instruments. You can change your snare drum. This is a 808 snare. There's a 909 snare. And then the 606 snare, etc. So it's pretty cool. No cowbell, unfortunately. But in all other ways, I think it's a pretty great drum machine. I've used it extensively, and I think it's really flexible and nice. I also like the fact that it does have built-in effects. I tend to use a filter and a delay, but there's a whole lot more in there. Bit crushers and distortion and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, it's a great all-around drum machine, but for the purposes of this channel, what I'm interested in is how it interfaces with modular. And I just want to do a little bit of a recreation and a patch breakdown to show you what I did with it last time. So you'll notice on the TR06 you have 5 channels of VC trigger out. And this is how I usually clock my system. So right now the TR06 is getting MIDI clock from the Digitact, and then I can convert that. I usually use the accent part and just send that into the system, and then I have VC clock, so everything in my modular will now line up with what the Digitact is doing. So that's one way to use it. Another way, which I'm really happy to say works really well, is you can kind of use it as a clock divider. So what I'm going to do is turn down all the parts. So we're not listening to the TR06. I'm going to switch over to the accent part. And what you'll see, and this is my standard setup for using this for clocks. I've got 16 steps, but I've only activated every other step, so that makes it eighth notes. And that seems to work best for clocking the system. So right now, if I were to run this into the modular, I would have a steady clock. And what I'm going to do is zoom out and patch some things together and let you see how I can use this thing and how you might be able to. Okay, so the first and most basic thing that I've been doing with this for quite a while is just using it as a general clock for the system. So I showed you just a moment ago what my pattern looks like on the accent part. I've got every other step activated, and that's going to be just a basic clock. Okay, so I've got a basic patch set up on the DFAM now, and I'm just going to show you how I use the TR06 as a standard clock. So I'm translating MIDI clock from my Digitact over here on the left. That is controlling the TR06, and then I'm going to control the DFAM using one of the trigger outs. So I've got my accent part set up. On every other step, that gives us 8 steps out of 16. And I find that corresponds best to the tempos that I'm using in the system. If I do 16 steps, then it's going twice as fast. So I'm going to take my accent trigger out. I'm going to run that into the advanced clock input on the DFAM. You could do this in a number of different ways, but this, for simplicity's sake, this is what I'll do. I'm on step 1. I'm going to hit run on the sequencer, and it's waiting for input from the TR06. So now I've got the DFAM actually MIDI clocked to my Digitact, and if I reach over here and change the tempo on the Digitact, then it changes in the system, and that MIDI comes through the TR06 and into the system. And of course you can multiple that out to several different locations. So that's the first way that I use it. Let me show you another thing, and I luckily landed on one. Whoops, I forgot to mention the fact that you can do step jump with this as well. So just looking again at that same patch, one of the features on the TR06 is step jump, which is one of my favorite performance tricks. Or just a step loop, I suppose it's called. You turn that on and then you just activate steps to re-trigger. And then you can get different rhythms. So what's happening in this setup, and I'm sure there's other ways to do this, but that step loop is actually just sending faster signals to this sequencer. You can actually loop a step without a gate and pause. Yeah, you can get some really weird stuff with that. So the step loop is pretty cool and is worth mentioning. So without running anything, and I'm going to stop this and take this out. So without running anything, right now I've got my accent part that's sending my standard clock. And what I did in my most recent patch is I used the low tom and high tom parts to send different clocks. So it works kind of like a clock divider. So let's take a look at one of those. I'm going to press play here. And then I'm going to switch to the low tom part. Alright, and if the camera's picking this up, you can see that every step is illuminated on the low tom part, which is going to give us basically twice as fast a progression from what we had on the accent part. So I'm going to use that to clock my 960 up here. And let me set that up and I'll come right back. Alright, so I've got a basic patch set up here with my 960 sequencer. That's sending CV to my oscillator driver, which I'm using to control this oscillator. And I'm running that into a mixer and then into the filter and out to the world. So what I want to do is control that sequencer and also open the gates. There's two things you need to do. I've already got my envelope generator set up to come out of the S-trig from the interface. And what I'm going to do is take my clock signal and I'm going to use the low tom. And I'm going to take that low tom. First thing I'm going to do is run into a multiple because I need to do multiple things with it. So the first thing I do with that multiple is send it out to the the V-trig in on the interface. Now these pulses are going to tell the gate to open. But I also want to tell have these pulses tell this sequencer to advance. So I'm going to take another signal from the multiple and run that into the control of timing. Now, unlike the DFAM, which has to be turned on, this is going to automatically advance based on the triggers it's getting. So let's see if it works. There we go. So what's happening here, if you look at my low tom part, you'll see every note is lit up, as opposed to the accent part, which is every other step. So it's moving twice as fast, and you can see that visually. So it's kind of like a built-in clock divider. Now the other thing that I did in the recent patch is I ran a different timing out of my high tom to control my other 960. So I'm going to set that up and then come right back. Okay, so I've set up another synth voice pretty much identical to the first. I've got my 960 driving the oscillator driver, which is controlling this oscillator, which is running through a low pass filter up here, coming through a VCA, which is controlled by this envelope, and then out to the world. So same basic setup. What I'm going to do this time is take my high tom trigger out to drive this one. And I've done something different with that sequence. And this is where, if you're doing polyrhythmic stuff, you want to just do your math. So what I've done, let me see if I can turn all this down just so you can see. What I've done is I've set up triggers so that I can get 3 against 4. So I just did the math to come up with the spacing on that. Now if I leave this as it is, then we're going to get an extra beat at the end that we don't want. So 3 and 4 are related to 12. Can you tell I'm not a mathematician? So what I'm going to do is change the last step of the sequence down from 16 to 12. And the reason why that works is because these guys aren't keeping track of what step 1 is. We're just sending pulses to tell the sequencers to advance. So if you've got an even number of pulses, then it's always gonna work out. So what I'm gonna do then, I've got everything set up, and I'm gonna take this trigger out from the high tom. And because I need it to do multiple things, I'm going to run it into a multiple. The first thing I need it to do is control the timing of the sequential controller. So that will shift the sequencer. Second thing I need it to do, just like before, is I need it to give me a trigger out so my VCA will open via the envelope. Okay, so that's wired up. Let's turn the sound back up and then see what we get. Alright, so you've got 3 different timings running from the TR06. I've got what I'm calling standard time on the DFAM. I've got double time on this sequence. And I've got 3 against 4 over here. I've divided it into an even number of steps on the sequencer, so it's always starting in time with itself. And that's it. I've got basically a triple clock divider. that can be controlled by via MIDI. Anyway, lots of fabulous stuff you can do with this, and I'll draw to your attention that I still have two bass drum and snare drum parts that I could use to send other clock signals. And then on top of all that, there is the fact that you actually do have a drum machine. So anyway, that's sort of a quick and dirty tutorial on how to use the TR06 in a modular environment. This thing is awesome. If you don't have a drum machine, it's small. It can run on batteries if you needed to. It can communicate between MIDI and CV, and it'll give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different rows of timing that you can use to advance sequencers or to do all sorts of other things. So I highly recommend it if you're in the market for a drum machine. Future videos will start diving into the DFAM, but I wanted to get this out there while it's on my mind. All right, thanks again for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't and you like this content and you want to see more. Soon to come is some DFAM deep dives in the modular environment. All right, take care. Bye.